everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Black-Liberation.Tech podcast. I am your host, Dr. Renee Jordan, and today we are going to take a look at another interactive digital literacy lesson from the Black-Liberation.Tech website. So let's go ahead and hop on over to Black-Liberation.Tech for our lesson for today. All right, so here we are at the Black-Liberation.Tech website. Once again, it is both in English and Spanish. We're going to head over to lessons and scroll down to interactions where we will take a look at the different types of digital literacies. And for today, we're going to take a look at D 2.0, a story of persistence. And with many of the lessons, this lesson starts off with a story. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we have an image that was generated by ChatGPT. Let's head on down to the story. For those of you who are listening as opposed to watching on YouTube or one of the Black-Liberation.Tech social media platforms, please feel free to hop on over and see the images and see the lessons or visit the website and view the lessons for yourself. Okay, so let's get started. A story of persistence. Ebony's journey from Hampton, Virginia to the Ivy League wasn't easy, but it's what she's done with her knowledge of technology that defines her. She says, you have to create something, share it, and you do it almost instantaneously. That's power. Ebony is a grassroots organizer, and her understanding of technology comes from a combination of self-learning and mentors who helped her shape her professional path. As she reflects on how she applies her skills in the OER project, Ebony recounts how technology helps her share ideas, organize events, and collaborate with others. It's about using digital tools to communicate, whether it's sharing a thought on X or organizing a community meeting through Zoom. Digital platforms make everything faster and accessible, she says. For Ebony, the key to successful online collaboration is knowing how to effectively communicate and share ideas. I didn't learn these things just by reading books or watching videos. It was through asking questions online, reaching out for advice, and putting things into practice. That's how I really grew in my digital literacies. All right, so that was the story to get us started. Next, we're going to take a look at digital literacies and reflection and writing prompts. Review the examples of digital literacies. From the list below, select 5 to explore further throughout the lesson. Based on your selections, reflect on the corresponding prompts and write out your responses. You may use those selected or choose new ones later on in the lesson. You are welcome to skip any of the prompts that do not apply and jump to the guiding questions for online search to learn more about how others demonstrate the digital literacies. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and read through the list of digital literacies that are highlighted in this lesson, and then I'm going to tell you which ones I picked to explore further. So we have reading a lot online, liking, socializing, sports banter, politics banter, banter in general, talk, complaining, tweeting, reposting, and unfollowing. All right, so out of these, the first one that I selected was reading a lot online. So here are the prompts that I needed to answer for this digital literacy and my responses. So once again, to help us move a little faster, I have pre-written my responses to these prompts. And so I will take this opportunity to share them with you and think of it as a think aloud. I don't know how many of you have been in classes where the instructor goes over word problems and then they tell you how they would go about solving it and they say out loud their thought process. So that's what I'm going to do with you. So while I'm doing this think aloud, if you will, I want you to think about how you will respond to these prompts yourself. Not that I want you to be like me, but just so that you can hear my response and think about what your own response could be. How would it be different? How would it be similar? How would you approach it in a whole other way based on who you are as an individual? So here are my responses. So, reading a lot online. How do you approach reading content online? For example, articles, blogs, books. What methods help you absorb and analyze information? Here's my response. When I read online, I treat it like a practice, one that blends curiosity with structure. If it's academic reading, I approach it systematically. I usually start with the library databases or open access journals to make sure that I'm getting credible, peer-reviewed information. I use tools like Google Scholar, not just to collect citations, but to trace how different scholars are talking to each other across disciplines. When I'm preparing for something major, like a comprehensive exam or a research proposal, I read with a clear goal in mind. I'm looking for the procedures, frameworks, and examples that can directly inform my own work. Outside of academia, my reading rhythm changes a bit, but the intention stays the same. When I'm exploring products, services, or tech tools, I'll search through Google reviews and forums because I want to understand how people experience things. I believe that lived experiences teach us just as much as formal research does. I also make time for personal reading, like when I read Becoming by Michelle Obama, because books like that pour back into me and remind me that reflection is part of growth. When I'm analyzing what I read, I always have a pen nearby. I'll mark up the margins with questions that pop into my head, and those questions often become prompts for writing or class discussions later. I like to chunk information into small, manageable sections rather than just copying text. It helps me process ideas and see where they connect. I'm always searching for gaps in the literature, the missing stories, the unacknowledged voices, because that's where new insight lives. And for me, reading culturally relevant material isn't optional, it's necessary. Those texts pour into me. They give me energy, perspective, and language for the experiences that shape me. They remind me that reading is not just about understanding others, it's also about seeing yourself reflected in the work and recognizing your place in the story of knowledge making. All right, and so the next question says, or prompt, reflect on a time when reading online content led to a significant personal or professional insight. Okay, and so here's my response to that prompt. One of the most significant professional insights I've ever had came from reading about the daughtering methodology. I actually stumbled across it after attending a peer's prospectus defense in music education. The term caught my attention right away. It just resonated with me. As soon as possible, I looked it up and downloaded Black Feminism and Qualitative Inquiry from the library's digital collection. At the time, I had been feeling a bit stuck in my research. I knew I wanted to explore something more humanizing and culturally grounded, but I wasn't sure what that looked like methodologically. Reading about daughtering, especially its focus on decolonizing knowledge and decolonizing the mind, was like opening a door that I didn't even know existed. It spoke directly to what I was trying to do with my work. It also helped me see how this framework aligned beautifully with Ubuntu, the African philosophy that guides much of my thinking. I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. That connection helped me look at my data differently, more holistically, and through a lens that truly honored the communities my research represents. On a personal level, I also had one of those moments of revelation while reading Letter to My Daughter by Maya Angelou. I read it over 2 days, and one line in particular resonated with me. I'm not a writer who teaches, I'm a teacher who writes. That line stayed with me. It reminded me that teaching is at the center of who I am. No matter where my work takes me, writing for me is an extension of that calling. It's how I keep teaching, connecting, and reflecting even when I'm not in a classroom. All right, let's take a look at the next prompt. All right, so this next prompt says, how do others read and curate content online in a way that you admire? Let's take a look at my response. When I think about people whose digital reading and content curation I admire, the first thing that comes to mind is intentionality. I deeply admire women who share boldly and consistently, especially those who use platforms like LinkedIn, conferences, or grassroots workshops to make knowledge more accessible. To me, that's a practice of generosity. It's about refusing to let information stay trapped in elite enclosed spaces. Every time I see a woman share her insights openly, I'm reminded that our voices are not meant to be hoarded. They're meant to circulate, to reach the people who need them the most. One of the things that I would like to say right here is that I definitely like it when people are able to share what they've read in places and spaces like TikTok, so it can cause others to want to pick up a book, whether it's on their Kindle or whether it's a hard copy, and give it a read themselves. My response to this question continues. I also really value writers who can take something complex and make it simple without watering it down. The people who can translate academic theory into language that everyday people can use, those are the ones I look up to. They remind me that clarity is not the opposite of depth. It's a mark of mastery. And then there's Gen Z and even Gen Alpha, who constantly inspire me. I love how fearless they are about discovery. They'll dive right into a new platform, remix ideas, test boundaries, and make the digital space their own. They remind me that creativity doesn't wait for permission, it just moves. I've also been fortunate to have mentors and colleagues who model another form of digital wisdom, the kind that comes through conversation. I think of Tony Carr, for instance, who once gave me homework to read more about Ubuntu and pointed me towards specific scholars to explore. That kind of guidance is invaluable. And so just as a side note, when Tony Carr gave me those lists of names, I jumped to my school's database to see which ones I could access online, which ones I could download, as well as which ones I needed to go in person to pull up. I also downloaded some to my Kindle so that I could take a look at them in their digital format. Sometimes having a conversation with a living, breathing library of information can give you more direction than hours of Googling ever could. Those exchanges remind me that digital literacy isn't just about the screen, it's about relationships, dialogue, and the human networks that keep knowledge alive. All right, now let's take a look at the next prompt. How can you refine your reading habits to improve your comprehension and retention of online material? And here is my response to that one. When it comes to refining how I read online, I've learned that being proactive, curious, and systematic makes all the difference. I don't wait for someone to tell me what or how to read. I take the initiative. If I'm in a course and there's a textbook, I'll go through it on my own terms. Even if there's no assigned homework, I'll still take notes, mark up ideas, and make connections that deepen my understanding. Learning for me has always been about curiosity, not compliance. One of my favorite habits is turning the headings and subheadings of a text into question. It's a simple shift, but it helps me focus my reading. Instead of passively taking in information, I'm hunting for answers, mapping ideas, and mentally checking what's most relevant to the goals I have for that project or class. If something is giving me trouble, say a dense theory or math concept, I'll look it up on YouTube. But here's the key. I don't just watch the video. I follow along with pen and paper. There's something about writing it out that makes the learning stick. Your brain remembers what your hand has done. I also like to make my reading personal. As I read, I'll jot down my reactions, not just summaries, but real questions and thoughts as if I were talking directly to the author. Those notes often turn into comments or questions I bring into class discussions or even into my own writing. It keeps me engaged and reminds me that scholarship is a conversation, not a monologue. Finally, I make it a point to read across disciplines. Some of my biggest insights have come from texts that technically had nothing to do with my field. When you intentionally seek out voices that are different from your own, especially from underrepresented or global perspectives, you grow in empathy and depth. It pushes your thinking, challenges your bias, and strengthens how you make arguments. So for me, refining my reading isn't about adding more. It's about reading with purpose. Every scroll, click, and highlight should move me closer to understanding people, ideas, and possibilities more deeply. All right. Now let's take a look at the guiding question. And I have it pasted here so I could save it for later. But the guiding question for reading a lot online says guiding questions for online search. Search for Latinas, Afro-Latinas, and Black women in academia or technology who are known for their expertise in absorbing and synthesizing online information. What reading habits or techniques do they recommend? Now, for this, I took that search and I dropped it into my Google search engine just to see what would come up. And here are the results. All right. So for those of you who are watching, I'm going to skip some of this and you'll see why. So notable figures and their contributions. So we have Dr. Timnit Gebru, a prominent figure in AI and technology. Dr. Gebru co-founded the Distributed Artificial Intelligence Research Institute, DAIR. Through her work, she synthesizes complex technical information with social justice issues, making her known for ethical AI research, drawing on diverse sources to identify and explain bias in large language models, and community-rooted research, emphasizing methods that counter the traditional centralized influence of big tech and AI development. All right, the next person is Dr. Joy Buolamwini. As the founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, Dr. Buolamwini gained fame for her research on algorithmic bias. Her recommendations for synthesizing information, which she demonstrates in her work, include interdisciplinary synthesis, combining technical analysis of AI with social and artistic methods to make complex issues accessible to a wider audience. Critical evaluation, highlighting the social implications of technology and challenging the uncritical acceptance of data and code. All right, we're going to move on to the next person, Ruha Benjamin. A professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, Benjamin founded the Ida B. Wells Justice Data Lab. Her approach to information synthesis in her research focuses on the social dimensions of technology, analyzing how science and tech intersect with issues of race and social justice. Data for Good, using data and online information to produce knowledge that serves communities, a practice central to the lab's mission. Recommended reading and synthesis technique. The reading and synthesis habits recommended by these and other digital literacy experts emphasize a critical and purposeful approach, including 1. Practice critical digital literacy. Move beyond simply consuming online content and actively question its source, intent, and accuracy. This involves questioning authority, so evaluate who is creating the information and what their potential bias or motivations might be. Cross-checking. Compare information from multiple sources, especially for conversational topics, to ensure accuracy and a balanced perspective. Looking for patterns. In both fiction and nonfiction texts, pay attention to repeated words, themes, and images to identify author's main message. Now, I've said this before, but these are the results from my search. Your search may come up a little different based on your search history. Perhaps some of the same people show up. Perhaps a completely new set of folks show up. But at any rate, I want to encourage you to not only look this information up for yourself, but also verify it. I'm doing a Google search, and these are the responses that came up as a result of the AI option, if you will, to the search results. See what your results say, and then check them against other resources. Go to another source. Go to the actual organizations or institutions that the search tells you to see if it verifies with them what it's stating here. Okay, synthesize with purpose. Synthesize information with a clear objective, whether for academic research or social advocacy. Define your purpose. Before you begin, identify what you want to achieve with the information you gather. Organize your notes. Use a table, metrics, or mind map to track your sources, their main arguments, and how they relate to your purpose. This makes comparing and contrasting easier. Connect the dots. Explicitly link the ideas and evidence from different sources in your writing. Use clear topic sentences and transitions to show how sources complement or contradict each other. Number three, engage in reflective practice. Information synthesis is not just a technical process, but a reflective one. Ask why. Don't just absorb information, ask why a particular perspective is being presented and why it matters. Reflect on your own bias. Acknowledge your own preconceptions and actively seek out diverse sources to challenge your existing beliefs and broaden your understanding. Practice with others. Engage in discussions with others to share insights and questions, gaining valuable input and exposing yourself to different viewpoints. Number four, for experts like Dr. Joy Bulamwini, combining information is a creative act that can involve art and advocacy, not just academic writing. Other creative synthesis strategies include use diverse tools, utilize digital tools for organization, but don't be afraid to use analog methods like free writing or journaling to explore your ideas and reactions. Incorporate different formats. Don't limit yourself to text. Acknowledge and integrate information from videos, podcasts, and other formats that are increasingly central to online life. By adopting these habits, you can follow the example of leading figures like Jibru, Bulawini, and Benjamin by moving from simple information gathering to critical, ethical, and purposeful knowledge creation. All right, so that is what I have for that one. So now we're going to take a look at the next digital literacy that I explored in this lesson, socializing. How do you use digital tools for socializing? For example, networking, chatting, making friends. Okay, and here is my response. For me, digital tools serve two main purposes: strategic networking and staying connected to my people. On the professional side, I use platforms like LinkedIn and academic networks as spaces for both visibility and connection. They're not just about posting achievements, they're about building relationships and sharing knowledge. I use those spaces to spread awareness about my mission, offer advice on navigating careers in school, and connecting with others who are doing work aligned with mine. I found that showing up consistently and sharing my journey through my blog and podcast allows me to leave a kind of digital breadcrumb trail, something others can follow, reflect on, and maybe even use as a guide for their own path. But beyond networking, I also think about socializing as community care. For instance, I regularly text nieces, sometimes just to check in, other times to share advice or encouragement. It's a simple act, but it keeps that intergenerational connection alive. So, like I said, I text my nieces. I actually text them every Sunday. And one of the questions that I ask them is, did they have any adventures? And I also share my adventures from the week. That way, when I get to see them in person, I have something to talk about with them. I can ask them how their last adventure was. How are things going with work? How are things going with school? How are things going with their hobbies and their interests? And that way, when I see them, I'm not just talking about when they were 5 and 3 years old, but I'm able to have a conversation with them as they are full grown adults at this time, at least my oldest ones. And so that is a great thing that I'm able to do and I enjoy. So I'll continue reading my response. And when I'm in new or unfamiliar settings, I lean into light conversations. Talking about things like the weather, traffic, or even a graduation countdown might seem small, but it opens the door for more meaningful exchange later. It's a part of learning how to navigate different social environments without forcing connection. Even if professional spaces like conferences, I think about socializing as part of the work of community building. Whether I'm moderating a session or facilitating a panel, I'm creating space for dialogue, helping others feel seen, heard, and included. That's networking at its best. It's relational, not transactional. Okay, now one thing I want to say about this is that you might ask, Dr. Jordan, I thought you were talking about socializing online. Well, In order to socialize online, you have to be sociable in person. And so a lot of the times what happens is that connection that I make in person, I take it over into my online network, for example, LinkedIn. I'll meet with someone in person at a conference or at a workshop, a symposium. We connect on LinkedIn, and then I follow up and say, hey, remember you said you wanted to work with me on something? When do you have time next week to chat? Here are some times that work for me. Perhaps we can jump on a Zoom call and just discuss the possibilities or discuss where we are and see if there's another connection that can be made as a result. All right, now the next prompt says, think about a time when socializing online led to a meaningful connection. How did you approach it? Okay. So here's my response to that prompt. One of the most meaningful connections I made online came at a moment when I was completely stuck during my doctoral studies. I was knee deep in my dissertation and struggling to figure out the right method of data analysis for one of my research questions. I got to the point where I literally had a headache trying to make sense of it all. In that moment, I remembered something simple but powerful. Two heads are better than one. So I decided to reach out. I texted a friend first just to get my thoughts moving. And then I called another friend, Dr. Rebecca, who had already earned her PhD and was familiar with the process I was navigating. That call changed everything. She didn't give me the answer directly, but she gave me space to think out loud. I talked through my theoretical framework, methodology, and data sources. And somewhere in that conversation, the answer revealed itself: multimodal analysis. It was such a breakthrough moment. That experience reminded me that sometimes the solution doesn't come from sitting in isolation. It comes from connection, from saying, hey, can I talk this out with you? Talking things through with someone you trust can untangle what feels impossible. Another meaningful connection came from nurturing a professional relationship over time. I first met Dr. Patricia A. Young at the AECT conference back in 2017. From that initial meeting, I made it a point to stay in touch, sending updates, checking in casually, and sharing where I was in my doctoral journey. That steady communication built trust and rapport. And eventually, her feedback and insights helped me clarify my direction and strengthen my work. What I learned from both experiences is that online socialization doesn't always have to be transactional or immediate. Sometimes it's about planting seeds of connection, seeds that grow into mentorship, collaboration, or simply encouragement when you need it most. Okay, let's take a look at the next prompt. What methods do others use to socialize online in a way that you find positive and constructive? Okay, so here's my response to that. When I think about how others socialize online in ways that feel genuinely positive and grounded, three things always stand out to me: amplification, accessibility, and mental well being. First, I really admire people, especially women, who share boldly and consistently. I'm drawn to those who use their voices to amplify ideas, not gatekeep them. Whether they're posting on LinkedIn, leading workshops, or giving talks, they make knowledge accessible. They don't hoard what they've learned behind paywalls or prestige. They put it out there so others can benefit. I love seeing someone take a deep dive podcast or long form talk and transform it into a 60-second clip that someone else can absorb between classes or during a lunch break. That kind of micro sharing is powerful. It meets people where they are. Then there's community. I've seen how much strength and resilience comes from networks built by Latinas, Afro-Latinas, and Black women in professional and academic spaces. There's a quiet kind of brilliance in the way we look out for each other, sharing funding leads, reviewing drafts, sending encouragement before a big presentation. In some spaces, they turn what could be isolating, especially in academia, into something affirming and sustaining. And lastly, I deeply respect people who navigate digital spaces with intentionality. They know that not everything needs to be shared. I've learned from them that it's okay to have close friends in real life who aren't your followers online. That boundary doesn't make the friendship any less real, it just keeps it healthier. I think that's such a wise approach, especially in a world where social media often blurs those lines. The people I admire most remind me that digital engagement can be freeing when it's rooted in purpose and care. It's not about constant visibility, it's about showing up in ways that align with your values, your energy, and your peace. Let's take a look at the next prompt. How can you improve your digital socializing skills to build stronger relationships and networks? Okay, so for me, improving how I connect with people online really comes down to being intentional about outreach, communication, and care. The first thing I've learned is that consistency matters. If I reach out to someone, a mentor, a colleague, or even a potential collaborator, I make it a point to follow up, to check in. It doesn't have to be every week, but I try to touch base every month or quarter just to keep the relationship alive. A simple, how are things going? Or I read your recent article and thought it was brilliant goes a long way. It's about being genuine and observant, not performative. People remember warmth and sincerity more than titles and credentials. I also believe deeply in reciprocity. You can't just take, you have to give back. I make an effort to ask, how can I support what you're doing? Whether that's sharing a call for proposals, amplifying someone's talk, or even sending a quick note of encouragement. Those gestures build trust. And I've seen that paying it forward creates what I call a resource trail, something others can follow and build from. Another big one for me is setting boundaries and managing my digital environment. Social media can be powerful, but it can also be draining if you're not intentional. I unfollow accounts that post content that feels harmful or heavy. I try to fill my feed with what uplifts me, creators, scholars, and communities that educate, inspire, or spark joy. Protecting your peace is a part of professional growth too. When it comes to socializing itself, I like to keep things light at first, especially in new spaces. Not every conversation has to go deep. Sometimes just chatting about traffic, travel, or upcoming events helps ease social anxiety and create space for authentic connection later. And finally, I've learned to reflect and plan. I'll sit down and ask myself, what kind of community am I trying to build this season? Sometimes it's more academic, other times it's creative. At the end of the day, digital socializing isn't about collecting contracts. It's about cultivating relationships. And the more intentional I am with that, the more meaningful my digital world becomes. Okay, so let's take a look at this guiding question. Guiding questions for online search. Look for Latinas, Afro Latinas, and Black women in the tech or creative industries who use socializing online to expand their networks. What socializing platforms do they use to connect? Okay, so let's take a look at the response. Latinas, Afro Latinas, and Black women in tech and creative industries use a mix of traditional social media and private community-based platforms to expand their networks. They use these platforms for community building, career advancement, mentorship, and sharing experiences and resources. Social platforms for networking, professional networking, and community building. LinkedIn as the primary professional networking site. LinkedIn is essential for women of color in tech and creative fields. It allows them to connect with peers, find job opportunities, and engage with industry leaders. Facebook. Many organizations use private Facebook groups to create safe, curated spaces for women of color in tech. The Latinas in Tech Facebook group, for example, is used for sharing ideas, job opportunities, and event information. Slack. Private Slack communities, such as those for La Nueva Link, provide a space for Latinx creative professionals to network, share resources, and discuss industry insight. WhatsApp. Some groups like Black Women in Entertainment, BWIE, have started private WhatsApp groups to organize and mobilize large networks. Content creation and personal branding. Instagram. This platform is widely used by women in both tech and creative fields for networking. They use it to share professional experiences, showcase their personal brands, and build a strong, accessible community. Groups like Latinas in Tech and influencers like Afro-Dominican writer Elizabeth Acevedo also use Instagram to reach their networks. TikTok. Latinas and Black women use TikTok to build community, share their tech career journeys, and offer advice. They use short form video to dispel industry misconceptions and reach a wide audience. YouTube. Black and Latina creators use YouTube to produce and share video content, allowing them to provide resources, share their stories, and reach audiences that may not be served by mainstream media. Industry specific and emerging platforms. GitHub and Stack Overflow. For those in tech, these platforms are crucial for collaborating on projects and demonstrating technical skills. Meetup. This platform is used to organize in-person and virtual networking events for tech professionals, including those by organizations like Latinas in Tech. Specialized networks. Niche platforms are also used to connect with specific groups. Examples, Blacks in Technology and Black Tech Pipeline. Hashtag Black Tech Twitter community. Alpha for Women in Tech. Caribbean in Transit for Caribbean and African diaspora creatives. Strategies for effective online networking. In addition to using specific platforms, these professionals also use effective online strategies. Influencer collaborations. Partnering with influencers is a common tactic, particularly for entrepreneurs, to increase visibility and credibility within their communities. Branded content and storytelling. Sharing personal journeys and behind the scenes content on platforms like Instagram build trust and engagement with their networks. Hashtags. Strategic hashtag use helps to increase discoverability and connection with others in their field. Collaborative live streams. Women entrepreneurs often go live together on platforms like Instagram to share knowledge, cross promote, and engage their audiences interactively. All right, so that was the end of the prompts for socializing. I will share that the next sets involve tweeting, reposting, and in following. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause there and we'll circle back to those last three next week and we'll move forward from the lesson from that point. So I want you to think about what we covered so far. And I want you to share how reading a lot online helps you, or if it's something that you've noticed others do. I also want to ask you, how does socializing in online spaces help you? Are these digital literacies that you considered before this conversation? If not, I hope you do. Some things you might recognize that you do already. Other things you might recognize and say, hey, you know what? I do this, but I'm not quite that intentional when it comes to socializing in order to gain mentorship, socializing in order to gain opportunities to collaborate, socializing in order to help me along my journey, even if it's with a peer. Perhaps reading a lot online is something that you might want to revisit. In addition to blogs, take a look at other things that you're able to get a hold of digitally and see what connections you can make across different readings, whether that's academic, professional, or personal. Reading, as they say, is fundamental and necessary. It's required, if you ask me, and it's something that I try to encourage people to embrace. With all that being said, I want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Black-Liberation.Tech podcast. I am your host, Dr. Renee Jordan. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and share, rate, and review the podcast to help it become more discoverable. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.